My name is Matthew Ahmadi. I'm a National Heart Foundation Research Fellow at the University of Sydney and the Deputy Director of the Mackenzie Wearables Research Hub at the Charles Perkins Center. And my research mainly revolves around using wearable technology to measure lifestyle behaviors such as activity, sleep, and sedentary time, and its relation to non-communicable diseases over the life course, primarily cardiovascular disease and cancer. So in this research, we use the UK Biobank cohort, which has around 100,000 participants wearing wrist-worn devices similar to a smartwatch that track their activity, sedentary, and standing time. And what we did was link this information to each individual's health outcomes over a period of about 8 years, specifically looking at cardiovascular disease, such as heart disease, stroke, and myocardial infarctions, as well as circulatory issues such as varicose veins and deep vein thrombosis. And we specifically focused on time spent sitting and time spent standing throughout an individual's day and week. And what we found was that more time spent sitting, unsurprisingly, was related to a much higher risk of cardiovascular disease and circulatory diseases as well. But what was really interesting was that what we also found was that more time spent sitting didn't necessarily lower a person's risk of cardiovascular disease, nor did it increase the risk. It was a null finding. But what it did do was actually increase their risk of circulatory diseases. What that means is more time spent standing in a stationary position may potentially increase someone's risk of acquiring deep vein thrombosis or varicose veins later on in life. So over the past 10 to 15 years, there have been a lot of studies looking at time spent sitting and time spent standing with cardiometabolic outcomes, that being blood pressure, insulin sensitivity, and triglyceride levels. And what they found that, once again, more time spent sitting was worse off for you. However, standing potentially could lower the risk of these increases or even potentially negate them in total. However, these are what we call soft endpoints, cardiometabolic soft endpoints. What we're able to look at in the UK Biobank in our study was what we call hard clinical endpoints. That's hospitalizations from these diseases or mortality from them. And what we found that differed from these other studies was that the risk of cardiovascular disease wasn't necessarily lowered. It wasn't increased either. So that's really important to note. Standing didn't increase or lower your risk of cardiovascular disease. It just stayed null. But what it did do was increase the risk of other types of circulatory conditions that could later on down the road impact a person's overall health and really limit their mobility and ability to participate in day-to-day activities. Therefore, I think what our study is really unique and novel is that it's able to identify that standing by itself isn't necessarily the only form of treatment. It needs to be mixed in with other types of activity that gets you moving out and about. So if you're sitting at an office job for, say, 10 hours a day or more, you want to break that up with periods of someone, as you said, standing desk, but mix in time spent walking. Take the stairs at the office, go for a cup of coffee, walk around the building for a few minutes. Mixing in that movement or ambulatory time in addition to standing time is what can optimally lower someone's risk of cardiovascular disease without increasing their risk of getting these circulatory conditions either. So I think this potentially has some really nice impact people to make them more aware of ways they can improve their overall health. People are very much aware that sitting is bad for you. Standing is very easy for someone to do. It may be an alternative option. However, what we're able to supplement that with is that standing by itself won't necessarily improve or lower your risk of cardiovascular disease. Standing needs to be mixed in with other forms of activity that gets the body moving. Because, at its simplest form, if you're walking and moving about, that's going to actually improve your circulatory conditions. And that's why we're not seeing the risk of orthostatic diseases or deep varicose veins and deep vein thrombosis when someone's walking around. We're seeing it mainly when they're standing stationary, standing still, because you're getting that blood pooling in the lower extremities. So that's mainly the mechanism at play here. Everyone knows going to the gym, exercise is really good for you, but not everyone has the time or the affordability to actually do that in the day-to-day life. So when we tell people about these lifestyle behaviors that they need to change or modify to improve their health, we always need to be conscious of what is most feasible for the average working adult, middle-aged, and older-aged people. I think the big takeaway is that if you find yourself sitting for long periods of time, try to break those periods of sitting up and mixing some time spent standing and some time spent walking primarily. Mixing standing and walking together, as from what our study shows, could be a really nice remedy to lower your risk of cardiovascular disease and not increase your risk of circulatory conditions.